If we continue the same way we have done until today, we're nowhere to achieve any of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. To achieve 100%, we need not only to accelerate, but change the course in many of these targets. It's a bit of a paradox that a farmer that producing food is dying from hunger. It's not about his fight, it's about a contribution to a better future.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to our podcast, The Zero Hunger Project. I am Suman Roy.
I'm Stacia and Neale.
And today we're going to talk about a topic which is very near and dear to my heart, but many of the people I know who have been listening and have been asking the same question. Can the United Nations actually end world hunger? And who better to talk about this topic than somebody I really consider my mentor and somebody I really look up to. And we're going to hear from him directly. So, Stacia, you want to introduce him?
It's my great pleasure to read this considerable bio on our guest today, Stefanos Fotiou. Stefanos is an expert on environment and sustainable development with 30 years of experience in the United Nations system, private sector, and research organizations. He currently serves as director of the Office of Sustainable Development Goals in the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, commonly known as the FAO, as well as director of the UN Food Systems Coordination Hub, an interagency unit of the UN established at the request of the UN Secretary General. In these roles, Stefanos provides strategic leadership and oversees coordination mechanisms to support countries on developing and implementing SDG-based agri-food transformations. One of his latest achievements is leading the successful organization of the UN Food Systems Summit +2 stocktaking that was characterized by many participants as the UN Assembly for Food Systems. Prior to joining FAO, Stefanos served 16 years in the UN Secretariat, including 6 years as director in the Environment and Development Division of the UN Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific, as well as 10 years in the UN Environment Program, leading global and regional work on green economy and sustainable consumption and production. And we were joking earlier that, I really wish you would get some more ambition, Stefanos, and do something with your life. It's
Sure, I'm excited to take them. Roy, this podcast coming from someone that works in the field to tackle hunger and poverty is extremely important, because sometimes we, the people sitting in the headquarters of the big organizations, we lose access to the field. So I'm very happy to talk to them that they do with our work in the field.
nice.
Thank you so much. That means a lot coming from you. So for many who is listening and tuned into this podcast, may have this question, which is, what is this SDG that we are talking about? What does SDGs mean? How did it come into effect? And where are we going with that?
So the SDGs are the Sustainable Development Goals, which set of, as the name says, 17 goals that they were adopted back in September 2015. And the question is not so much what they are. I think, there are 17 goals that they cover any aspect of human development, from social, economic to environmental aspects. And then trying to give a blueprint on how we can make our world better. They are based in the principles of the P5, the people, planet, prosperity, peace, and partnerships. And the question maybe is why we needed this framework. We needed this framework because, in the global multilateral system, the one that was put together after the Second World War, which is a system that wants to support all the countries to achieve prosperity, to live on peace, with dignity, with respect to human rights. We have seen that in this big endeavor, we need to have some big milestones, and what I would call some big beacons that they show us where we're heading to. And sometimes it's very important to know where you want to head. So to put some targets, to put some goals, to put some indicators and say that, okay, I'm aspiring in 10, in 50 years from now to be there. I'm aspiring, for example, by 2030 to have ended global poverty and hunger. And this is an inspirational agenda that ideally leads to the development of policies, practices, and actions from the government, from non-state actors, from the private sector, from businesses, from communities, from non-governmental organizations, from civil society. So this is what are the Sustainable Development Goals. We should look at them as the very big global beacon we have on making the lives of the people better in a planet that it will be thriving within peace, prosperity, and partnerships.
That's amazing. And the Sustainable Development Goals has a 2030 framework. Do you think we are in track to what we wanted to achieve?
No, I mean, every report that it has been done either by the UN system or by other organizations says that we're completely off track. If we continue the same way we have done until today, we're nowhere to achieve any of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. The exact figures, they say that in terms of the targets we have, we're about to achieve 1/3 of the targets. For another about 40%, we are in the right way, we do the right thing, but we need to accelerate. We need to do the things 5 or 6 times faster than we do right now. But there's another big part of around 30% that we're going backwards. So we need to change route and then to accelerate. I mean, the climate change objectives and targets are some of them, you know. We have some progress in areas like education, in areas like social protection. But as I say, it's marginal progress and it's not enough. So take it like this. Only maximum of 1/3 of the targets will be achieved by 2030 if we continue with the same speed we continue now. We have a chance to achieve 2/3 if we accelerate, and to achieve 100%, we need not only to accelerate, but change the course in many of these targets.
And possibly get a time machine, because I feel like some of this should have been happening before now. What are some of the major deterrents to us achieving these goals? Like what's standing in our way?
I've done a couple of months, I've seen it about 1.5 years ago, an article talking about the SDGs. And I use 3 concepts from the classical physics, the science of physics, to describe why sustainable development goals are not happening. So allow me to be a little bit professorial here, because, when I was doing my studies, what I wanted to become was a university professor. I ended up as a UN employee. Success or failure story, I don't know. Everybody will decide. But, I have sometimes this lecture style. So one, and I'm using the 3 ideas of momentum, friction, and inertia.
Okay.
So in physics, momentum is when you have something as a big force that continues, and imagine you have a stone that is going downwards on a slope, and then it increases speed. And if this stone gets a lot of additional materials, it increases on size. So we have what we call, after the Second World War and even after the Industrial Revolution, the momentum of economic growth. Everything is measured on terms of economic growth. The only measure of development and prosperity is the growth of the GDP. So the only thing we care about is how much the GDP is increasing. But we have so many studies to say that, listen, a GDP increase doesn't mean necessarily that you improve your well-being and that growth equals to development. I will give you a very theoretical example. Imagine an economy, okay? We go to the Scarborough economy. How many people you have there? How many people you have there?
In Canada?
No, in Scarborough.
Oh, in Scarborough. How many people are
700,000. That's like
700,000. Okay, so imagine the economy of these 700,000 people, yeah? And I read in your website that 1 out of 2 are living in relative poverty, correct? Okay, so imagine the 350,000 people that they live on this relative poverty. You had 2024, it completed a year, you had economic activity. Now imagine that what's happening in the next year, in 2025, is that you have exactly the same amount of people doing exactly the same economic activities. And the only thing that changes in your country is that you had a very big natural disaster and you lost 5,000 people. Do you know what will happen to your GDP? It will increase. It will increase because the loss of 5,000 people will need It means that you have, and you replace, let's say that you replace them also with machines, with robots, because you want a fast replacement. So you will need new money to buy machines. You will need money to I'm sorry for my expression, to bury these people. So your economy will expand. But tell you, are you going to have a better community there? No.
No, absolutely not.
So that's one thing, the momentum. The second is what I call inertia. Inertia is the phenomenon where nobody or no system wants to change the way that it's doing business. And we have inertia at different levels. First, we have an inertia at the policy level, where governments are really very risk averse and they don't want to change the way they do things because they are afraid of the political kind of force.
Yeah.
But I must say here, and I want to really look like the lawyer of the governments, but I do see a lot of governments that they do take decisive steps to change this business as usual thing, yeah? But also we have a lot of inertia from the private sector that says, okay, I care about profits. I know one way to do profits, and what you propose to me is risky, and I don't want to take this risk. And the third is what I call the issue of friction. If you put two elements to slide onto each other, depending on how smooth the surfaces are, you have friction. And sometimes this friction, it results to overheating and it results to destruction. So what's happening today is that I think we have seen a little bit of a wrong way on how we can achieve sustainable development. We try to do a sustainable development as an add-on to existing things, while we need a new redesign of things, So it's not trying to have a system that is problematic and add another way. No, it's sort of you need to go back and rethink. And it's not about a sectoral approach, but it's about a systems approach. So that's the way I describe why SDGs are not achieved so far.
It's fantastic. I think that's really an eye-opener for many, including myself, on where we are.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, first of all, I'd take you as a university professor any day. And second of all, I think part of the problem is that when you get these goals that are supposed to help advance mankind, that doesn't take capitalism, for example, into consideration. And as you say, people who are wanting to make profits. And so it's frustrating because what that's doing is actually setting everybody back. You have to get everybody to be at least like a little tiny bit on the same page, ideologically speaking, in order to get these goals achieved. And that obviously isn't going to happen, particularly in today's climate.
I think, it's because I had this discussion about the ideology in summary. I think I was in COP29 and somebody asked me what should be the ideology for distributing the climate financing. And I said, it's not about ideology. I think it's about facts and facts-based things. So I want to say that many times we have a problem that I would call short-termism. We are looking 6 months or 1 year ahead of us, either as businesses, because we need to see, the budget at the end of the year not being on the red. As governments also, they don't like to have deficits. There are governments that they believe that deficit is a sin, actually. And this is happening because we are looking at cycles of 6 months or 1 year. If we put even some of the classic models to work for us, and look what is the impact after 5 or 10 years, because that's the design horizon, yeah? We will get completely different policy recommendations. So who is going to say, all right, fine, I'm going to take the risk, could be a political risk or a business risk, not to design my policy or my business plan or everything on the basis of what will happen in 12 months from now, but what are going to happen in 5 months from now, 5 years from now, 5 years from now. And that's very important. And I think that this time horizon and getting the short-termism off, it also takes off things from the sphere of ideology. What we need, I think, is a basic adherence of the human rights approach we have achieved as a society with the United Nations, all the principles that they guide multilateralism. These are enough, I think, yeah? Of course, they are challenged today, yeah? Not only today. The multilateralism is challenged, but it's still there, and it's a hope for the people. So if we see the numbers right, I'll give you an example here. FAO last year had published an amazing report, which is about the true cost of food. And it says that there's a value of about $12 trillion, yeah? 12 trillion, more than 10% of the global GDP, of the hidden environmental, social, and economic cost of the way that agri-food systems work today, not of the agri-food systems. I mean, it's not about blaming the farmers. It's about blaming the way that the agri-food systems work. Can I give you a hint on a problem here? If you see the three main components of the agri-food systems, which is production, processing, and retailing. And let's even talk about industrialized economies here. So G7 or what we call the Western world. How much of the added value is going to the farmers? Do you have any idea?
I mean, I'd have to believe it's not very much.
I'll tell you the numbers. In the US, it's about 7.8 cents per dollar.
Wow.
Yeah, that's not a lot of impetus.
And this is in the United States, yeah? Which is an advanced country. In the European Union as a whole, I think is about 8.5%. 85% of the value of the global food system is going to processors and retailers. So you have a big imbalance there. And you need to look at this imbalance.
How do you address something like that? How would you even begin to try and shift that balance?
I think you need a lot of advocacy. You need to make people understand that their food choices, they have a specific impact. I think a lot of things have changed the last 50 years. I'm old enough now to have lived in another world where the consumption, and especially the consumption of food, was a totally different story. I want to make a disclaimer here that I think every person really is entitled to their own food choices, yeah? What they want to eat. If they want to eat vegetables, if they want to eat fruits, if they want to eat protein. But I do remember that when I was a 12 years old boy, we had a standard schedule of weekly meals in my home. It was a point that we were going to school 6 days per week, actually, in Greece. And only 1.5 days of this week, it had an animal protein. I'm not coming from a family that it was full. I'm coming from a low middle income family, but with a lot of legumes, a lot of vegetables. That's shifted a lot, yeah? So we know today that there are so many people over-consuming protein and are people that they are deprived of protein. So another thing is that when you start understanding a little bit what you do to your body and what you do to your planet and what you do to your society with your food choices, it might give you another perspective. Okay? I'll tell you a thing that it's a very big disaster, especially in the industrialized countries. The food waste, the food loss and waste. I mean, how much food we waste. Again, I want to make it a little bit personal here. I do remember when I was a kid, we were eating at the table, and if at some point a piece of bread was going down to the floor, just because we had a bad mood, our mother was asking them to pick it up, kiss it, and eat it.
It was precious.
I'm thankful to the bread. That's very important. And you know, the food waste is really especially the food waste, because the food loss is a bit of technological issue in many countries. But the food waste is driven by two things. By the overconsumption. I mean, we used to say that sometimes the eye is more hardy than the belly. Okay? So it's the overconsumption. And then the idea that, if it's more than 1 day old, I can't eat it. And all of this is specific messaging that has passed to the citizens, to the consumers, to make them behave on specific ways.
So, Stefanos, thank you so much for your time. This is amazing what we have heard so far. Your wisdom is unparalleled. But we are not done yet. We will be back next week to continue this conversation, because there's so much more that we can get out of Stefanos. What do you think?
I look forward to every minute of it.
That's awesome. So please subscribe to the Zero Hunger Project. Tune in next week, and we are going to continue this conversation.